Hello everyone and welcome back to JB's Total Gaming and another edition of Indie Game Roundup, where I take a look at some non-AAA games that you may not have heard about that I think may be worth a look. So the first game we're going to be taking a look at today is Battlestar Galactica Deadlock. It is currently available on Steam for the price of $40. And how does this game work? Well, first of all, you saw some turn-based stuff going on there, and then you see something playing out in real time, then you're going to see it stop in a second. So the way this game works is it is a space combat game set around the time of the first war between the humans and the Cylons. And so you'll see some of the older style ships, and it is considered to be a canon story, if you will. So you can see, you can change what direction your ship goes. You can actually change the yaw of your ship also, and the height of your ship. Yes, this game does play out in 3 dimensions. So each turn you're going to be choosing which way your ship's going to be turning, how fast it's going, whether it's going to move up or down, and also, if it's going to change its yaw and make an even sharper turn to allow for certain types of gunfire and things like that. So there is armor on all 4 sides of the ship, and there are special abilities, like you can shoot out torpedoes, you can have flat cannons meant to take out incoming missiles and things like that, but be careful, don't shoot missiles while you have flat cannons up because they will be destroyed, and you can hit your own fighters with it as well, so be careful about that. So then you choose all the things you're going to do on a turn, you hit go, and then about 10 seconds or so of real-time combat plays out, so you know what your ships are going to do, but not what the enemy ships are going to do, and it plays out, and then you start in a new turn. From everything I've been able to check out, this game plays really, really well, and it's really cool. It is a really cool space sim that has that interesting idea of being turn-based, but turns play out simultaneously. It's not like you activate a unit and the enemy activates a unit, or you activate all your units and then the enemy activates all their units. Everyone activates all their units and then it plays out, which I really, really like. And I do like that this plays out in 3 dimensions as well. A lot of these games, like Battlefleet Gothic, which I really, really liked, but it is worth pointing out that it only plays out in 2 dimensions because it's based on the tabletop game. So you can see there the 2 ships kind of in the middle of the screen. One of them was able to fire on another ship, even though it might have looked like their fire was passing through their own ship, because they are higher than that ship, and they're able to do that, and you're able to set up firing lines and things like that. So it sounds like I'm giving this game a lot of praise. There are some things that I want to point out, though. While it plays really well, there's a bunch of cool abilities. Also, like, for example, if you do yaw on your turn, you're less accurate on your shots. There's lots of cool, interesting things. And then you can also send out Vipers and things like that you have out there on the board. There is a pretty lengthy single-player campaign, and you can play against the AI, or I believe other players, where in that case you can play as the Cylons with the base stars and their ships and things like that. There are some UI issues with the game. First of all, the UI, the user interface, as you're looking at it, is pretty big, and it's a little bit clunky. In particular, if you have a bunch of Viper units out on the board, there is no way to select all or to group select or anything like that. So you have to select each individual unit, tell it where to go, and things like that. So between the UI not necessarily being fantastic and those kind of control issues, those are some negative things about the game. However, other than that, if you're a fan of Battlestar, or if you're just a fan of strategic space combat, then this is a game that I can pretty highly recommend. Plus, let's show off the coolest feature in the game. We'll jump ahead a little bit here. Once you finish a battle, then the whole battle plays out in real time, and it plays out, the music for this game is pretty fantastic, and it has kind of an AI camera that chooses different shots to show you. So the whole battle you just played out plays out in real time. Superhot did something like this, but it feels a little bit clunky with the way Superhot is designed. That it's understandable why it does, but this plays out beautifully. The whole combat plays out in real time. You get there is an original score for this, but it is reminiscent of in particular the newer Battlestar show, and you get things like this, the camera angles from just behind the nose of the Viper that they would actually show in the TV series. So while it's based on the old war, there's a lot of touches and homages to the new TV series as well. Well, newer, it's been a while since it was, but I really think this is a fantastic feature. Then if we jump ahead a little bit more, we can see kind of the story board where you're choosing where to go and things like that, and managing, there are a bunch of different human factions and they also can be fighting with each other as well. So all kinds of interesting things to check out. out. Some issues with the game, but overall, if you're into this type of game, particularly if you're into Battlestar, this is one I can pretty highly recommend. Alright, next up we have Rock of Ages 2. Now, I just want to point out for both the first game and for this game, I'm showing footage from Total Biscuit playing the game. And, well, what is Rock of Ages 2? Well, first of all, there is a story mode campaign where you come across different famous people throughout history. And the game, one of the big selling points is a very, very Monty Python-esque sense of humor. So these scenes are voice acted, and as you can see, kind of the cutout characters and weird animations and things going on is a big part of the game. If you're playing through the campaign and unlocking new things and new characters and new balls of destruction. So what do I mean by that? Well, whenever you play the game, as you can see, some of these things are unlocked, some of them aren't yet. You choose what you want to go into battle with. You can go into battle with 2 different boulders. By the way, the full title is Rock of Ages 2 Bigger and Bolder, of course. Fantastic name. And you can bring certain defenses. So there is, I don't want to call it tower defense because that's not exactly right. So the point of the actual game itself is to roll a big boulder at your enemy and continue to smash into their castle door until you bash it down. When the round starts, each player has a certain amount of money with which to set up defenses. So there are all different kinds of crazy defenses that you can set up, things that will slow down your opponent's ball or launch them in a certain direction or attack the ball. Because the point is, whenever you hit the enemy's castle, you want to be going as fast as you possibly can, and also you want to have as much health as possible. It is possibly destroyed before you get to your enemy if they do a particularly good job of doing a lot of damage to you. And you can see kind of in the bottom left, there are people working on the boulder right now. So basically, you have enough time in order to set things up while your boulder is being built, and you get more money by destroying units and stuff your opponent has built. So if you go on a run and you destroy a bunch of stuff, you have more money so that when your boulder has finished its run, whether it was destroyed or it crashed into your opponent's castle, then you have time again to build this stuff. One complaint that people have said is sometimes there is a little too much downtime in this section. Now, I do want to point out there are boulders of different types. Some of them take shorter to build. Maybe they hit a little less hard. And there are all kinds of specialty boulders that do some weird stuff, where there's one that kind of leaves this goop on the ground so that your opponents can no longer build defenses on those sections that the ground is covered. There's one really interesting one in particular that as you're rolling, it basically has a wick on the top of it, and it's a bomb. And if you keep rolling over that wick, and now you will actually see the boulder part. So this is the bowling part of it, if you will, where after you've had time to set up your defenses, you now attack. Now you can play this online as well against other opponents. You can play team 2 versus 2 and things like that. You can see the opponent launching a lightning strike because their boulder is not out on the board. If you look in the top right, there's a mini map. No, this is the AI that he's playing against, but now their opponent is rolling. So one of the things you can do is buy these lightning strikes if your boulder is not being built. And the goal is to destroy your opponent's castle before they destroy yours. And, well, you roll through, you damage stuff, and eventually try to get to the end where you want to destroy it. And here's the thing. There may be a little bit of downtime waiting for the boulder build. Oh, and I didn't finish talking about the one that blows up. If you keep rolling over that wick part, it will eventually get hot enough and explode. So there's some damage you see. Max speed, total damage, and eventually you want to crash down the, and you can see the enemy there, and Total Biscuit here is kind of building defenses while his next ball is being built. And, well, while there may be a little bit of downtime, if you end up spending all of your money, and some people really just aren't into the gameplay of this game. They say it's just too simple and too repetitive. There's this little bit of building defenses, and then you roll a ball. However, overall, this game has scored really highly, and if that concept sounds interesting to you, this kind of little bit of tower defense, if you will, and also, just doing crazy stuff and rolling weird boulders at your enemy, if that sounds like that it would be fun to you, which it sounds like it would be fun to me, then this game is probably worth checking out. So why don't we scroll ahead a little bit here to the end of the mission, because that's always fun too, to see the animations, and that when you finally break down the door and you go crush your enemy. In this case, I believe it is Joan of Arc that is being destroyed, and all of her followers. So there you go. There's Rock of Ages 2. It is currently available on Steam for $15. Now we're going to take a look at Darkwood. We actually have 2 horror games in a row. And let me know, guys, if you enjoy having like the full screen YouTube clips or the Steam page actually up. I decided to do a little bit of both in this video. Let me know what you guys like better, and I'll try to do more of one or the other as we talk about these games. So Darkwood, as you can see, is currently available for $15. Now this may look pretty simple. It is a top-down game, and it's not a straight-up jump scare horror game. There are jump scares in the game. It's actually more of a survival game than a horror game. So basically during the day you're going to go around, gather resources, and then at night try to withstand attacks. There are things that can kill you during the day as well, but it's a format that is used in a lot of survival type games. However, this one in particular interests me. I kind of like the stuff going on here. So you have a flashlight, and the flashlight, as far as I know, isn't like randomly going out at set points like other horror games or things like that. You have it on, and you can only see enemies in the light. So for example, if you see an enemy and then start running away, you know they're chasing behind you, and you may hear them, but you don't know where they are exactly, which can be kind of interesting. And as you go around and try to explore areas, a big thing you're going to want to do is find different places that are going to be hideouts, because at night things will most likely come and attack. And you want to do things like gather fuel in order to run a generator in the home. You want to gather resources to make sure you can board up doors and windows. You can actually move objects in the game by pushing them around to try to block doors to prevent access, board up windows to prevent access. Because when night comes, you're going to be having creatures coming and attacking you. And what is going to attack, how it's going to attack, what it's going to do is going to vary from night to night. There may be some nights that are relatively quiet. There may be some nights where you get attacked by multiple different things you've never heard of before, and really hope your defenses are good. And again, there are NPCs in the game you can find out, and it's just a weird and interesting world where you're trying to figure out what's going on. And even the first time you manage to beat the game, you may not really understand what's going on in this world. But from what I've seen of it, I like the setting of it more than a lot of these other games. And even though I'm not a big horror fan or a survival fan, I feel like this is one that I might potentially consider playing, because it's gotten a lot of good recommendations, and little things like the sound design is really done fantastically, particularly when you're being attacked at night. So if a combination, mostly survival, part horror game with this top-down look that looks relatively simplistic, but I do think does the job well with fantastic sound design and a little bit of trying to figure out what's going on in the world, sounds interesting to you, then I think $15 is a pretty decent price for Darkwood on Steam. Alright, next up is Observer. So Observer is currently available for $30, and this is a straight-up horror game. This is a game, the follow-up game to the people who brought you Layers of Fear. And a little bit of warning here, if you're sensitive to like flashing stuff and a bunch of crazy stuff going on the screen, you're probably going to want to avoid this game. There's a whole lot of that going on. And it's this game where you're sometimes doing investigations, like you can see here, using different filters and things like that to see what's going on. And you can kind of go into the brains of the deceased to try to discover things. And there are choices that you make as you go on. But this is a straight up horror game. If you checked out Layers of Fear and thought that was cool, this might be worth checking out. And again, this is not really my genre. I don't really tend to play a lot of horror games. And but I'm talking about this game because it's getting a lot of people saying they really like it. But be aware there's going to be a lot of visual effects and weird things going on as you play the game. But I feel like this game maybe has a little bit more story and not just jump scares and random stuff like a lot of the other horror games on Steam have. And that's why I'm bringing it up for those of you who may be interested in a horror game. That's Observer. So I've actually gone through these games in order in which I'm interested in them personally, and the reason this game is kind of last of the currently available games that I'm showing is, while I love Lords of Waterdeep, the board game, it may be the board game I've actually played the most, believe it or not. I've already played the iOS version a whole bunch, and so that's why this isn't really of interest to me. Now, here's the potential knock on the game. Although this game has very positive reviews overall, a lot of people have said like the UI isn't necessarily great, they haven't necessarily made a ton of improvements over the iOS version, so if you've played that, this may not necessarily play a whole bunch better. However, if you haven't played any of those, Lords of Waterdeep's a really cool board game. I believe I did a review on it. I'm almost certain I did. That it'd be probably a little bit further back in my videos, but it's a really neat board game, in particular, in my opinion, when you're including at least one of the expansions. I feel like that improves the game a lot, although just the base game is a good way to play it initially. It is a Dungeons & Dragons themed game, where the theme is you're gathering different adventurers together to go on quests. For some people, those adventures just break down into cubes, orange cubes, or warriors, and things like that. However, I think it's kind of fun to get into the theme of the game. You can do things like build buildings on the right side of the screen. You see those shown there. And it is a worker placement game, if you're not familiar with that term. You basically have a certain number of workers. In this game, they're referred to as agents. Everyone goes around taking a turn, choosing where to go to get different resources, maybe get more quests, get money, whatever is available. And if you build a building, for example, then anyone can go to that building, but if someone else goes to your building, then you also get a small reward for it, so that's why it's worth doing. And overall, it's a pretty solid game, and while there may not have been a whole bunch of improvements on the iOS game, it is a board game I like a whole lot, and it's available on Steam now for $15 if you want to check it out. So up next, we're going to have 3 games. This is a new thing I'm doing. I'm delineating any early access games from games that are currently available in their full form right now. So I'm going to call this my little early access corner. So let's talk about the first one. Alright, the first game I'm going to talk about is Warhammer 40,000 Inquisitor Martyr. That's a long name. So, you may have seen some of my Warhammer coverage before, in that I've never played the Warhammer Miniatures game, even though I'm doing a series now on different types of miniature games and what the new player experience is like. But never actually playing the miniatures game. I've been getting into some of the video games and the board games as well. My son Ian, the Warhammer Disc Wars board game, where it kind of plays out like a miniatures game, but you have these cardboard discs that are used instead of miniatures in order to make it much more affordable. It's one of his favorite games. He really likes it. And somehow I've been getting into the lore of Warhammer and games of Warhammer, even though I have not actually played the physical games, if you will. The Warhammer Quest card game is pretty good. And there's a lot of stuff out there. And there's a lot of terrible Warhammer games out there. But this one I think looks pretty cool. So what is this game? This game is an action RPG. So if you're not familiar with that, I also cover a lot of action RPGs, which is why I'm excited about this game. If you don't know what that is, basically Diablo. You go around, there's a lot of enemies coming at you. You progressively get more and more powerful and get more and more cool abilities. You kill a bunch of stuff, get more loot that makes you more powerful, level up, go back and kill a bunch of stuff. And the cycle continues. Now, this game, from what I've seen, I do want to point out it is in very, very early access. So if you're looking at this saying, going, I've got to play this game, you may want to wait a little bit into checking it out, because it is in very early access. And it plays out a little bit differently than some other games. There's a cover mechanism in the game that, that will go down, and while you still have this, I'm trying to remember what it's called in the game, but as long as that isn't gone, you won't get knocked down or knocked back or anything like that, but once it goes down, you're vulnerable and take actual health damage. And it plays a little bit slower than you would expect. A lot of these action RPGs are very, very quick playing. You're running around doing all this different stuff, but as you might expect, whether you're in some sort of power armor or whatever, it plays a little bit slower, but I don't mind that. I'm actually really intrigued to potentially play this game if I get a chance to at some point. And, if you're into the Warhammer lore and you're into action RPGs, bear in mind this plays a little bit slower, and it is in early access. It may be worth waiting until the game is either finished or at least in a more finished state than it is now. But if you're really chomping at the bit, then you may want to jump into checking this out. It is currently $50, which is another reason I'm telling people to potentially wait, to make sure to see more reviews and make sure this game is progressing and looking good. But if that's okay to you that the game plays a little bit slower, then this is pretty interesting in my opinion, and there are different classes you can play as like an action RPG, and I really like the look and feel of this one. I'm actually interested in playing a somewhat cover-based, somewhat slower game in the Warhammer universe, so this is one to definitely keep your eyes on in the future. Alright, next up is Divinity Original Sin 2. I love the original Divinity Original Sin. I really liked it when I initially played it, and then they gave the free updated version of it where they had voice acting for everything, which is astonishing because there's a lot of dialogue in that game. and it ended up becoming one of my favorites. I'm actually currently doing a co-op playthrough with my son on the original Divinity Original Sin, and the newer version with all the voice acting made it more accessible, so we're not have to constantly be reading dialogue, and my son is having a lot of fun playing it too, and I'm really looking forward to the second one. It is in early access right now. There isn't a lot of content available. I believe it's just the first chapter. And they're going to have co-op and different things like that, just like the original game had. I don't know if the original game did not have co-op originally. I don't remember. It has it now, and it's really fantastic. If you want a complete game and you like these very lengthy CRPGs, then I highly suggest checking out the original Divinity Original Sin. And if you have checked it out, or you check it out and you like it, or if you're not going to check it out but this still looks interesting to you, this is another one to keep your eyes on right now. You can see overwhelmingly positive reviews recently, 95%, 94 overall. People are really excited about this game. It is currently $45 right now, and again, I would suggest waiting, because I'm someone who doesn't necessarily really like parts of games to be ruined. That's rare for me to jump into an early access. I have done it before, particularly, I just did a review of the Fable card game, which, it's a card game, so I don't really expect that to change too much. But overall, this game is looking really solid, and from what I've seen, in my opinion, they've improved quite a few things, where the action point system is a little bit cleaner now. There's less action points, but it's easier to move. You're not constantly trying to move the exact amount or whatever to make sure you're maximizing your available action points. And these games have always had kind of a cool sense of humor. They're a little bit silly, and I also like that about this game. So here's another one to keep your eye on, Divinity Original Sin 2. Alright, last but not least, Sunless Skies. I did a couple videos on Sunless Seas, kind of the prequel to this game. There's also another game called Fallen London, I believe, which is all set in this kind of same universe with this same feeling. I really, really enjoyed Sunless Sea. I got into it and was playing a whole bunch of it when I initially got it. I've kind of fallen off. I haven't played it in a while, but it's a game with a lot of exploration. There are going to be set pieces in every time you play the game. It is a little bit of a roguelite, if you will, in that, it may be very likely that you die and then have to start over. However, the more and more you explore, you may come across some of the same stories that you came across in your original playthrough. However, they may have different outcomes or different things happen. And there's a lot of dialogue that is written, a lot of things to read in this game. There's a bit of resource management, different ways you can try to make money, shipping goods, destroying stuff, things like that. But the more you do combat, the more you're likely to be able to get blown up. But it's hard to describe this kind of Fallen London sort of setting and the feel of these games. They're weird, semi-creepy and ominous, and also beautiful in a way, even though a lot of the game it has kind of this dark aesthetic to it. So maybe if you want to go check out my coverage for Sunless Sea to get a feel for what this game may be like, and this game, of course, taking place, in the sky as opposed to on the sea. But it's looking like it's an updated version. It looks like some UI effects and some of the, it's more polished than Sunless Sea is just based on these screenshots. But if it's a similar style of game, then it might be worth checking out. So thanks a lot for watching this, everybody. Hopefully you appreciate me checking out some of these games you guys may not have heard about. If there's stuff you want me to cover, let me know. Let me know which format you liked better, if you liked being able to see the Steam page or being able to see full screen YouTube coverage. Thanks a lot for watching, everybody, and we'll talk to you again soon.